China 24, only on CGTN.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosted NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. They discussed Kyiv's so-called victory plan against Russia. Details of that plan have not been made public, but it reportedly relies on increased Western support and security guarantees. Ukraine also wants NATO to lift restrictions on the use of Western-supplied long-range weapons in Russia. Zelensky is scheduled to travel to France, Germany and Italy next week. South Asian countries should make it easier to do business with one another. That was the message from Chinese Premier Li Qiang. He was speaking at a summit for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in Laos. Ryan Meltzer is there.
At the China-ASEAN summit, the Prime Minister of host Laos called relations between China and ASEAN robust, substantive and mutually beneficial. He pointed to China being ASEAN's biggest trading partner for the past 15 years, while ASEAN has been China's #1 trading partner for 3 years now. China is also the third largest investor in the region. China and ASEAN are now set to further boost integration by upgrading their existing free trade deal.
The ASEAN-China Negotiation Working Group has reached a substantial conclusion on the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0, with the final agreement expected by 2025.
To ensure stronger and more sustainable economic growth in the face of global headwinds, Chinese Premier Li Qiang said ASEAN and China should leverage on their combined size of more than 2 billion people.
Strengthening market connectivity is an essential direction for further cooperation. The closer and more integrated the markets of China and ASEAN become, the more they can generate significant spillover effect on the economic scale, industrial agglomeration and development.
And on the sidelines of the main meetings, Premier Li held bilateral talks with the Australian Prime Minister. Both leaders said they feel that relations between the two countries are improving. Li added that China is willing to work with Australia to safeguard peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region, while encouraging more Australian companies to invest in China and hoping that Australia will provide a fair environment for Chinese businesses as well. Aside from attending the East Asia Summit Friday, Premier Li is expected to hold more bilateral meetings here between now and his departure for an official visit to Vietnam on Saturday. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Vientiane.
Wildlife populations have suffered a catastrophic decline in the past 50 years. That's according to a new report by the World Wildlife Fund. And conservationists say more needs to be done to implement the landmark 2022 Biodiversity Treaty. Owen Furclough explains.
Nearly 2 years ago, global leaders celebrated a landmark deal on biodiversity.
We are finally starting to forge a peace pact with nature.
A United Nations treaty committing 196 governments to complete or at least embark on protecting 30% of the world's natural habitats by 2030. But the cheers over that deal have been replaced by alarm bells.
Ecosystems are unraveling. We're headed towards species extinction.
The World Wildlife Fund says the average size of monitored wildlife populations have suffered a 73% decline in the last 50 years. It's even worse in Latin America and the Caribbean, a 95% decline. Species in particular danger include Amazonian pink river dolphins.
We're deforesting like mad. The fires burning in the tropical rainforests, coral reefs bleaching. So that's why we're seeing such huge declines in Latin America and the Caribbean.
These findings have been released as Colombia prepares to host the successor to the 2022 Biodiversity Summit, which concluded with that binding treaty. Conservationists like Rebecca Shaw want to see binding financial commitments from both the private sector and governments, as well as an end to subsidies for fossil fuels, typically aimed at keeping consumer energy costs down.
That $7 trillion a year in subsidy that is undermining climate systems and nature.
And this summit takes place just weeks before what's considered the most consequential U.S. presidential election of the modern era.
We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to get your energy costs in half.
Not least.
Single word about environmental protection, though plenty about extracting fossil fuels like oil, which drive climate change. And Trump's advisors say if he wins the White House, he will once again withdraw the U.S. from the International Climate Change Treaty, having done so in his first term, only for current President Joe Biden to rejoin it.
And while Democrats are typically more concerned about the environment, polling suggests it's dropped way down the list of priorities for all voters. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Coming up, a high-profile retirement in the sports world, plus find out who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And later, top designers gather for one of the biggest events of the year, Shanghai Fashion Week.
Introducing CGTN Now. Find award-winning documentaries and exclusive content from around the world. Latin America like you've never seen. Breakthrough films shining a light on important stories. In-depth discussions with fascinating people. Giving you new perspective on topics that matter. You also get live, round-the-clock international news and headlines, and so much more. Original content from CGTN's Global Bureau. Download the CGTN Now app and find the global perspective you've been missing. Available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire. Or go to cgtnnow.com on your tablet or mobile device. CGTN Now. See the difference.
Modern vitality, born of ancient civilizations. Asia exemplifies diversity in its best sense and welcomes changes at the fastest pace. Asia Today brings you the headlines from the most populous continent, puts in focus politics, economies, and faces, and takes you on a tour of the sights.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
And it's official. One of the world's greatest tennis players of all time has announced his retirement. 38-year-old Rafael Nadal, by all accounts, is considered a legend. He's won 22 Grand Slam titles throughout his career. Nadal, who's had to deal with a number of injuries, called the decision difficult. His final tournament will be the Davis Cup next month, where he'll be playing for his home country of Spain. South Korean author Han Kang is the latest Nobel laureate. She won the top prize in literature for her intense poetic prose. The Nobel Committee says her work confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life. Han is the first South Korean to win the Nobel Prize for Literature and the second South Korean to ever win the prestigious award. Former President Kim Dae-jung won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2000. Prize winners receive $1.1 million from the Swedish Academy. And finally, Shanghai Fashion Week kicked off, showcasing the latest styles for next spring and summer. And this year, a growing number of foreign designers are trying to break into the Chinese market by joining one of Asia's biggest fashion events. Chen Tong reports.
With the debut of the works of Chinese renowned fashion designer Liu Yan. The Spring and Summer 2025 Shanghai Fashion Week has officially kicked off. Liu Yan's new collections this season continues her style of simple cutting.
This season continues our style of big woman. We've combined some retro elements from the 1980s.
In addition to fashion debuts, showrooms with over 300 brands are in town to welcome buyers. It's the second season for the Shanghai Fashion Week this year. And what's special about this year is even more foreign faces are set to be in attendance. Over 50% of the exhibitors at the show are foreign brands searching for opportunities in the Chinese market. It's the first time for Vietnamese designer Linh Nan to attend a fashion week outside Vietnam. She believes her evening dress design caters to the taste of Chinese consumers.
I decided to go to Shanghai. This is the first gate to go to international because Shanghai is the biggest one, the biggest fashion week in the world or in Asia.
Already toured the previous season this March, US buyer Marvin reveals is back again to Shanghai this season.
It is different than kind of like Paris or New York. It just seems more innovative. Yeah, more technology is being used and more creativity. Yeah, so I think it's a fresh take on fashion. So far, I've really enjoyed the 3D footwear. That's something very fresh and new for us.
Fashion activities this season will last until the 17th of October with hundreds of commercial and designer brands showing their looks for the spring and the summer season next year. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Asiya Inamdar in Washington. We'll be back with more headlines at the top of the hour. And for more news anytime, you can go to our website, cgtn.com.
World Insight. China's economic strategy. After rolling out a new stimulus package, what's the significance of the new measures? What does it mean for business and investment? Today we get the answers from experts and financial leaders.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Chinese Premier Li Qiang on Tuesday called for implementation of the incremental policies to stabilize the country's economy after the recent introduction of a series of incremental policies that cover a wide range of important sectors of the economy, including expanding the industry catalog for foreign investments, unveiling more big foreign invested projects, and broadening its visa-free transit policies. The new policies attracted wide attention and boosted the confidence of the investors in China's economy. How big is the potential impact on that of the Chinese economy? How to maintain global investors' confidence in the Chinese market? I asked Hubertus Veit, Managing Director of the Frankfurt Main Finance. Joining us now, Hubertus Veit, Managing Director of Frankfurt Main Finance. Hubertus, good to see you.
It's very good to see you, Tian Wei.
Thank you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule traveling around Asia and beyond. Let me ask you about your latest response toward the policies coming from China, whether it is about boosting the financial market or the real estate sector, as well as the latest financial and monetary policies.
You see, in the beginning, a lot of observers called it too little, too late, but they're getting quieter by the day. I say it's the right mix, beautifully timed. The package actually between the central bank and the government has been unprecedented. It has a volume of 1.5% of GDP and comprises lots of instruments, which I believe will be very effective. So from the early responses of the stock market, you could clearly say it's been a big success. And it's been a very important move. Why am I saying that? Since the beginning of the year, M1, which is the critical monetary aggregate, the monetary aggregate that comprises basically cash and term deposit and demand deposit. Now, this has been in negative territory for a while. And these moves now clearly give such a shift to liquidity in the market that we see a big boost.
We see some of the latest measures certainly make the stock market very excited. For example, the reduction of interest rates and also the reduction of the down payment, for example, and the list goes on. How do you make of the immediate short-term excitement in the stock market vis-a-vis what China has as an aspiration for high-quality growth and transformation of its economy?
Yeah, so of course now it's a liquidity-driven rally, and it's been historic by proportions. I mean, 1 week with a rally of 20%, that's been a very, very rare thing to experience. So. But obviously, they have to trickle down. It will be now a liquidity-driven rally, which hopefully will be supported by the trickling down of that impact into growth, into long-term economic impacts. This will take a couple of months to really see it. And when you say high quality, it has to be a massive shift away from a real estate-driven economy to a technologically led recovery, and particularly clean tech-led recovery.
You see the Politburo meeting in China, the end of September, is what, as some analysts say, unprecedented. Usually the Politburo in China, the policymakers, are talking about economy in specific meetings that are taking place in the months of April, July, and December. There were some exceptions, but they were rare exceptions. We see some specific talks of monetary and physical measures, as well as stimulus that's likely to take place. Of course, at this moment, we do not know yet many of the details. And according to the Tuesday morning press conference given by China's NDRC officials, there is still a shy of specific numbers of stimulus coming out and being announced to the public. But to you, how do you read, different signs, and how do you see the importance of financial and also monetary policies in addressing the confidence of foreign investors, particularly foreign financial investors like yours?
Yeah. So let me start with the first part of your question. I think it's not a negative that not all policy details have been hammered out. The direction is right. The market clearly smelled that there is a massive impetus coming, and the fine-tuning, well, leave it to the time, leave it to seeing how the market responds, how the action is a period of fine-tuning. It is not changing direction. The direction is set right, and it's been a strong impetus. So I'm not worried about there is not clarity about all measures yet. So that's number one. So that means we will have a long rally to come if things go right. What do I mean by that? There is a saying in the market that says, the market climbs a wall of fear. And there is still fear out there. And because of that, the market climb has a long way to go. And to establish the trust and filter these measurements down and to stay the course and stay that course on the impetus of the measurements. That is what needs to be done. And I read from what I hear coming out of China as that it's been clearly understood and it's meant to happen.
I do want to ask you specifically about China and Germany as well. The comprehensive strategic partnership, we also see pragmatic cooperation between China and Germany, very much high on the agenda over the past decades. Now, we of course, is aware of the complex situation, including geopolitics. So from a financial service center like in Frankfurt, how would you be able to peel off all these complexities and be able to focus on the core of business?
Yeah. Well, we've been blessed that in October 1st, 2023, the Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng and the German Minister of Finance Christian Lindner actually signed the latest agreement between our two countries. And it's been focused on financial services. Forgive me if I'm a little bit tight-lipped on specifics, because my sources eventually would be upset if I would give away. But I can tell you is that it's going very, very, very well, in a sense that we have increased and deepened cooperation in future based on that agreement in October last year. A few days ago, spoke to people from Linde Forklift. Linde is a world leader on forklift manufacturing, and they built their entire production capacity on e-forklifts in China. So it's a massive production site, it's a massive investment. And the financing has been handled both out of Frankfurt and out of China. So two financial centers built a massive capacity there. So from my point of view, there is a lot of common ground to be built and a lot of common ground to be made.
Thank you for your insights and your advice. Hubertus Veit, Managing Director of Frankfurt Main Finance. What a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. China is confident of achieving the full-year growth target while formulating new supporting policies to sustain steady and healthy economic growth. The fundamentals of China's economic development and its huge market potential and strong economic resilience remain unchanged. So what's the focus of the Chinese economy next? Answers from our panelists. To both of you, among all the messages coming out at the presser on Tuesday morning by NDRC in China, are there some specific ones that to you crucial? Professor Liu, briefly.
The cognition that a Chinese economy has encountered a number of challenges, be it a cyclical issue, be it a structural issue, etc.
Yeah.
So now it is clearly a quantitative easing. So by jump-starting the Chinese economy in the invigorating the financial sector through quant easing, and in the meanwhile, to compare with the big dosage that was delivered in 2008 and 2009 for the 4 trillion RMB, the government has really learned some of the lesson to stimulate excessive capacity. So therefore, they try to deliver the quant easing in a slow of measures, and also they take a more of a comprehensive and holistic approach to address a number of issues instead of simply boosting the industrial capacity.
Now, to you, Mr. Ross, among the policies being mentioned, do you think those different directions are being addressed efficiently?
Well, I think there's 3 main components, of which I would say 2 is fine, and 1 I would have some further questions about. Right? The ones which are fine is there's measures being taken to boost consumption. These are particularly focused on poorer people, which has already been done, and on young people with aid to students, and as it's put, youth and older people. Right? This is not a big problem. That's clear. That's within the budgetary control of the government. Then there are steps to take forward various state investments. That's clear. That's being controlled by the federal budget. The issue in which I would hope there will be measures, and I'd like to see a bit more clarity, is on the question of private investment, because that has been under downward pressure. And confidence is not enough. You've got to also generate cash. I mean, there are some things which are very useful, which are such as the reduction on interest rates, etc. But I would like to see a bit more on that, because otherwise, for example, the stock market increase is not going to be able to continue. So the whole a serious problem. admirer of China's economic policy, but I think a policy in which you didn't have rental sector, you basically moved 100% ownership of houses was a mistake. Even the most developed economies have a rental sector. I noticed that, for example, therefore, various local authorities are actually buying up various parts of the unused sold property in order to re-establish a rental market. That will have a good medium-term effect. But the short-term one is going to be the question of interest rates and the mortgage rates.
The Chinese officials talked about the ever-challenging external environment that China is facing, while at the same time, the important task of transforming. What is the pragmatic and realistic expectations when so many different factors are combined during a time of transition? Mr. Ross.
The negative is that the US economy is slowing down. There was a misunderstanding. The US economy was supposed to be doing well in the last year. In fact, it was just recovering from its downturn with COVID. That's a negative. The positive is that the Federal Reserve will respond to this by sharply reducing interest rates, and this will create bigger space for China to carry through further reductions in interest rate, which I'm very much in favour of.
Right.
So it's a slightly contradictory situation.
Mr. Liu, Professor.
Yes. Well, if you read all the documents and all the reports, there has never been a time that is not really challenging in the external environment. But the key lies in how we can really govern our economy, given more complexities and given more variables that are brought into real control. So I think in this sense, the quick dosage is only there to jumpstart, but how we can really run the car smoothly and sustainably along a wider road is much dependent on the increase of the governance and also more of the institutional reform. Right. Because printing money is the easiest one that can generate immediate impact, and we have to be prepared about the negative impact that can also be created out of there.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
You're watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. China's rapid development has attracted global investors, institutions, and talents. One of them is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Since its establishment in Beijing back in the year 2016, the Multilateral Development Bank has been financing infrastructure projects that prioritize sustainability. It has since grown to over 100 approved members worldwide. How does global institutions like AIIB see the strength of that of the economy in China? And how can China attract more global talents? I asked those questions to Danny Alexander, Vice President for Policy and Strategy with AIIB. You are here in China for 9 years. You see come and go of foreign expats here in this city and also in this country. Are they going to like migrant birds, even leaving at times but coming back in the future? What does it take for this city, which you've been living in, and also this country to be attractive to everyone?
So I've I've enjoyed many aspects of living here in Beijing. I think for Beijing really to become a truly international centre, which is what Beijing aspires to be, it needs to think about all of those things. The good environment, very important. That is a great success. More to do, but a great success. But also the kind of international feeling of the city. It's important that you can attract people from all over the world, not just in embassies, but more broadly, let them feel at home. AIB is a beacon for that. You know, we have more than 600 staff now from more than 60 different countries around the world, you know, coming here with their families. And we are constantly working with the local authorities to see how can we improve that environment. But I think Beijing has many qualities. You know, it's, as I mentioned, the environment already, the nature that is around this city. It's very safe place to live, especially if you're coming with families. That's important. Yeah. Easy to cycle in. You mentioned we cycled together. There's, you know, great food and so forth. So Beijing has a lot of strengths. I think that if the government really wants to develop AIB as an international city, they have to focus on those strengths, but also have the confidence to open up a little bit more, to help people to really, you know, want to come here.
Right.
You know, I think for me, living in Beijing has been a very special experience. I've learned a lot from it, and I really wish that others would come and do the same.
We see the world's economies have been changing, and now we are in a transition. Recently, China takes measures, for example, about possible future stimulus policies.
Yeah.
The stock market are getting ever vibrant and interesting.
Yes.
Without going into details about that, but you know, as a leading economy in the world and as a member of AIB, how do you, as the staff, observe the transformation of economy here, and how do you see that is an important factor in your work?
I mean, so the first thing to say is that I mean, AIB is investing in infrastructure projects all over.
Absolutely.
And so we are focused on the high quality impact we can make, whether it's in China, India, Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, many other members. But of course we're based here, so we observe what's going on. I mean, what I observe is that China is in the middle of an important transition, you know, in the sense that the economic model that helped China to succeed through the last 40 years is going to need to change if China wants its economy to continue to succeed in future. You know, you have a wealth of well-educated young people. You need to deploy those people in a better way. As you said, many challenges in the housing market and elsewhere. And then policies come, right? So it's I wouldn't want to comment on individual policies in any of our members, but I would say that because China is now, you know, a very large economy in the world, what happens in China has a big effect. You know, especially for other Asian countries. I think we calculated that 1 percentage point of GDP growth in China delivers 0.3 percentage points of growth in the rest of Asia. So maybe the core point is that whether people like it or not, the global economy is interdependent. And therefore we have to hope that all of our members find the right policy mix for themselves to achieve the economic development that they need and that their people need. And the AIB, through targeted interventions, through high quality infrastructure, through spreading the values of high standards, through pushing the policies for climate transition, can help to ensure that that development is high quality and it's environmentally sustainable. And I think if we can do that, then AIB is making really a contribution to the global economy.
Meanwhile, we also see the rise of the Global South, quote unquote.
Yes.
And among your members, Global North and Global South, they are working hand in hand. So what is the way of you know, having different aspirations and priorities to be linked together and be able to work with synergy? I think that's also an interesting question. How do you see the concept of Global South and make everybody to work together?
But I think one of the strengths of AIB is that we have all kinds of members.
Yes.
We have developed countries, we have developing countries, we have Asian countries, we have Europeans. We have increasing membership in Africa and Latin America also. And so it's truly global in terms of the membership and the influences. But I think what's important is to say that although the perspectives are different, all of those members are committed to the same fundamentals in terms of high quality multilateral governance, in terms of real quality in terms of the investments, the kind of core goals about supporting economic development through infrastructure investment, and especially environmentally sustainable, technology-driven development. And so I think that we have to create institutions like AIB, and there are many existing institutions like the World Bank and the IMF where this happens extremely well, where all the countries of different backgrounds, different characteristics are working together towards these kind of common goals. And if you can articulate those common goals clearly, and you can stay true to them as you move forward, then I think that can be done.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us. Bye for now.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario.
Dangerous flooding, rescues, and a lot of damage. Millions without power after Hurricane Milton makes landfall in Florida. We have a live update coming up. At least 28 Palestinians killed after an Israeli attack on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza. Plus a damning new report on what the UN calls Israel's deliberate assault on Gaza health facilities. An alarming decline in wildfire population around the world, with a warning not enough is being done to implement a landmark biodiversity treaty. And later, Shanghai Fashion Week kicks off with all the glitz and glamour. A look at the designers and brands trying to enter the lucrative Chinese market. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Asiye Namdar in Washington, and we begin with the destructive aftermath of Hurricane Milton in Florida. The dangerous storm is moving into the Atlantic after making landfall near Siesta Key, about 112 kilometers south of Tampa. It spawned a tornado and brought floods and storm surges. Water rescues are still underway, and the flooding is expected to last for weeks. The heavily populated Tampa Bay area appear to have escaped the devastating storm surge, but the barrier islands are inundated and some totally unreachable. Millions have no power or clean drinking water. At least 12 people are confirmed dead. CGTN's Nitsa Soledad Perez is in hard-hit Siesta Key. Nitsa, what is the latest?
Well, the people and the state of Florida are still assessing the impact of Hurricane Milton. The majority of those fatalities are attributed to the tornado outbreak that happened before Hurricane Milton made landfall. 5 of those deaths happened in St. Lucie County. That's on the opposite side of the state. Also, emergency crews are right now trying to rescue and shelter people that were stranded because of flooded waters in Daytona Beach, also on the Atlantic coast, highlighting the widespread impact of Hurricane Milton in the state. At this time, close to 2.5 million people are without power. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis gave a press conference a few minutes ago saying that at least 800,000 homes had their electricity restored. But at this time, still the governor is touring all those affected areas. Let's take a listen.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall, and the storm surge, as initially reported, has not been as significant overall as what was observed for Hurricane Helene. Right now, it looks like Sarasota County had the most significant storm surge.
Here in Sarasota County, 66% of the population, the homes, are without power. The gas stations are closed because there's no power. And 340 people had to be rescued in this county because of flooded waters. Asia.
So you had an opportunity to speak to some of the people who are now cleaning up this mess and assessing the damage. What do they have to say?
Well, where I'm located right now is Siesta Key, one of the Barrier Islands of Sarasota County, and where Milton made landfall. So earlier in the day, access was restricted, so we had to come in walking. And one resident, Michael Holderness, he's a small business owner. He owns a small hotel here in Siesta Key. He was just trying to absorb what Mother Nature brought onto them for the second time after Hurricane Helene. Let's listen.
It's a big mess. We still had the trash that was not picked up, so that had a lot of projectiles flying around. We had some flooding, lost some roofs. Hopefully no loss of life. We're just out here assessing the situation, helping clean out the road and seeing what we can take care of.
Were you expecting it to be worse?
I don't know. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It looks like some areas have taken it harder than others on Siesta Key. But yeah, I'm probably a little relieved that it wasn't worse than it is.
The Barrier Islands got the worst part of that wind damage from Hurricane Milton. And hurricane season is supposed to end on November 30th. But I would say that because of how warm the ocean waters are, we could definitely expect, or there is a big possibility of another hurricane coming our way. Asia.
Nitsa Soledad Perez in Siesta Key. Thank you. Now to the Middle East, and a deadly Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza. At least 28 Palestinians are dead. Israel says it was targeting militants, but the attack reportedly hit a meeting of aid workers. Akram al-Satari reports from Gaza.
The situation is extremely catastrophic. The bombardment that hit the place was very powerful, that it took the life of the 28 people and injured the 92. The UNRWA is also upset about the situation. They have been condemning the targeting of the shelters, and they have been seeing in that as a targeting of the general life of the population who are not engaging in any military activities in the area. According to the statistics and the details of the people who were killed, some people are 87, some people are 66, some people are 85, some people are 58, some people are 52, some people are children. So the number of the people and the ages of the people are indicative of the fact that the ones who were inside that shelter, the internally displaced people, are the ones who bore the brunt of that attack and the ones who paid the heaviest price, given the large number of people who were killed, including some elderly men, women, and children, and also the large number of people who were killed. The Palestinian Minister of Health made a special statement about that. They have used as a reference the details and the biodata of the people who were killed. to show that the ones who were the victims of that incident are the Palestinian civilians who were targeted and who are still being targeted throughout the whole war, and who make around 2/3 of the number of victims in that war. So another incident, another targeting of a shelter, another condemnation by the international organizations, and another death and funerals that will be now heading to the graveyards if they have space, or they would be burying people on top of other people who were deceased or dead a few months or a few days or a few weeks ago. Critical situation, misery that is still continuous in Gaza.
Akram al-Satari. Now, a UN inquiry accuses Israel of intentionally destroying Gaza's healthcare system. It calls Israel's attacks deliberate, saying they amount to war crimes. Israel has long maintained Hamas militants operate from hospitals, schools, and private homes. Hamas has denied those claims. The inquiry also accused Israel of deliberately killing and torturing medical personnel in Gaza. Israel did not cooperate with this investigation, saying it is biased. Meanwhile, UN officials accused Israel of firing at 3 of their peacekeeping positions in southern Lebanon. 2 were hurt. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, says it is deeply concerned by recent attacks on its positions. Yasser Hakim reports from Beirut.
Well, the United Nations said that this attack has been deliberate because there was another attack just at the same time on the parameters of the monitoring headquarters at the area, and that's destroying all the monitoring equipment and the cameras that are showing what is happening on the ground. And therefore, the UNIFIL is saying that Israel is deliberately not just fighting or hitting at the UNIFIL positions, but also trying to keep it hidden by hitting all the cameras and surveillance cameras and equipment in the area. The UNIFIL is there to try to keep peace between the borders of the 2 sides, which is the de facto blue line border, that separates both. Around 10,000 peacekeeping troops are there from 50 countries, and it has repeatedly said that Israel has been targeting the UNIFIL to try to push them away from this area so that the infiltration by the by the Israeli military into Lebanon would continue on a more aggressive style. But the UNIFIL has previously said that it will refuse to move from the area and will keep there to try to maintain at least some kind of peaceful peaceful coexistence in this area, and try to stop the fighting. So until now, the UNIFIL is saying that is calling on Israel not to repeat these attacks and to refrain from hitting the UN peacekeeping forces, and is also working on trying to mediate between both sides to stop the attacks on the border between the 2 sides. The Lebanese Health Ministry issued a statement warning that Israel should not hit paramedics who are trying to help, who are obviously armed and trying to help the injured Lebanese on the borders and the cities in the south of the country. As the air raids continue along the southern borders of Lebanon, which is right behind us on the other side. And at the moment, what the Lebanese Prime Minister said, Miqati, after this attack, is that he is continuing talks with the U.S. To try to push Israel for a ceasefire along the border and try to return to the de facto blue line 1701 border that has been agreed upon before and that has been in place for more than 15 years.
Yasser Hakim in Beirut. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosted NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ukraine's President Zelensky. They discussed Kyiv's so-called victory plan against Russia. Details of that have not been made public, but it reportedly relies on increased Western support and security guarantees. Ukraine also wants NATO to lift restrictions on the use of Western-supplied long-range weapons in Russia. Zelensky is scheduled to travel to France, Germany, and Italy next. Polls have closed and vote counting is underway in Mozambique's national election. The ruling Frelimo party is widely expected to win again after 49 years in power. unofficial monitors, though, are compiling their own tallies to try and detect signs of fraud. The same party has been accused of rigging elections in the past, claims it denies. Early results are expected on Saturday, with the final tally in 2 weeks. Still ahead, China's premier has a message for Southeast Asian nations, plus the world lagging in its efforts to prevent wildlife decline. A look at the alarming findings after the break.
360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
South Asian countries should make it easier to do business with one another. That was the message from China's Premier Li Qiang. He was speaking at a summit for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, also known as ASEAN, in Laos. Ryan Meltzer is there.
At the China-ASEAN summit, the Prime Minister of host Laos called relations between China and ASEAN robust, substantive, and mutually beneficial. He pointed to China being ASEAN's biggest trading partner for the past 15 years, while ASEAN has been China's #1 trading partner for 3 years now. China is also the third largest investor in the region. China and ASEAN are now set to further boost integration by upgrading their existing free trade deal.
The ASEAN-China Negotiation Working Group has reached a substantial conclusion on the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0, with the final agreement expected by 2025.
To ensure stronger and more sustainable economic growth in the face of global headwinds, Chinese Premier Li Qiang said ASEAN and China should leverage on their combined size of more than 2 billion people.
Strengthening market connectivity is an essential direction for further cooperation. The closer and more integrated the markets of China and ASEAN become, the more they can generate significant spillover effect on the economic scale, industrial agglomeration and development.
And on the sidelines of the main meetings, Premier Li held bilateral talks with the Australian Prime Minister. Both leaders said they feel that relations between the two countries are improving. Li added that China is willing to work with Australia to safeguard peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region, while encouraging more Australian companies to invest in China and hoping that Australia will provide a fair environment for Chinese businesses as well. Aside from attending the East Asia Summit Friday, Premier Li is expected to hold more bilateral meetings here between now and his departure for an official visit to Vietnam on Saturday. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Vientiane.
Next month, world leaders will gather in Peru for this year's APEC meetings. Representatives from the 21 member economies are expected to focus heavily on trade and investment. And one such project is a new megaport nearing completion on Peru's Pacific coast. It's being billed as the gateway to Asia. Dan Collins reports from a small fishing town where the port is under construction.
This is the Shanghai megaport, a new trade hub that could transform Peru's fortunes and radically change the lives of the people living in and around this sleepy fishing port. After 5 years of construction by a consortium led by Chinese state-owned conglomerate COSCO Shipping, it's beginning to take shape. With little time to go before the inauguration, construction here has continued apace. Behind me you can see some of the 27 new automated cranes installed in 4 terminals here at the port, which its backers say will be the new hub for trade between South America and Asia. Once up and running, these 4 terminals will be a people-free zone. The idea is that these fully automated cranes will be directed from a control room. The port could represent a technological leap for Peru.
This port can generate many growth opportunities from connectivity, from railroads, from the industry. Many industries and logistic companies want to position themselves here because this is going to be the center, logistics hub of South America.
The port on the Pacific coast will be the first in the region to have the capacity to dock some of the world's biggest cargo ships. Part of the Belt and Road Initiative, this colossal project is so ambitious that it's expected to dominate maritime traffic along the Pacific coast of South America. The biggest selling point is that those new routes will shave days, even weeks, of transit times across the ocean. By slashing transit times by 10 to 12 days, the Chancay multi-purpose port terminal will cut costs and make Peruvian products, from textiles to minerals to fruit and vegetables, more competitive. But it's Peruvian farmers, especially those in nearby Huaral Valley, who could benefit most.
Huaral is the capital of agriculture in Peru. We have almost 80% of all fruit and vegetable products. We have pitayayas, avocados, vegetables like lettuce, among other things. So, the fact that the transportation would take less time gives us the opportunity to do packing at less cost. That is a huge advantage for us.
Back in Chancay, however, there is uncertainty about the port and what it means for the small town. They worry about the economic and environmental impact and are annoyed that they have had little input in the $3.6 billion project. Juan Cabezas leads a small-scale fishermen's union and says fishing for a living is no longer viable.
Fishermen will definitely have to start doing other things. Some have become motorbike taxi drivers, others are looking for work in agriculture, others are trying to change and study something to fit in with this mega project.
Right now, Chancay doesn't feel or look like a trade hub, but some residents have the vision to see its potential, like businesswoman Cielo Augusto.
I sell more than 21,000 loaves of bread a day, so this definitely has to expand. Suppose we have a population of 60,000 inhabitants now. With the Chancay megaport, we are predicting that we will have about 200,000, so this bakery business will have to triple or quadruple its sales.
Trucks coming to the port will arrive here from the Pan American Highway and then pass through this 1.8-kilometer tunnel bored beneath the town of Chancay. This tunnel, the longest in Peru, will connect the logistics center to the port terminals without disrupting traffic in the town. The governments of both countries have described the megaport plan as a win-win for China and Peru. Between the year 2000 and 2020, bilateral trade between China and the region boomed from 12 billion to 315 billion.
Chancay is a promise, no? The promise to have a better logistics in Peru, a promise to have new sources of income among the rest of the countries, a promise of new flows, no? of transportation of goods and services.
While the transition may be challenging, Chancay's future looks brighter. Dan Collins, CGTN, Chancay.
Wildlife populations have suffered a catastrophic decline in the past 50 years. That's according to a new report by the World Wildlife Fund. And conservationists say more needs to be done to implement the landmark 2022 Biodiversity Treaty. Owen Furclough has more.
Nearly 2 years ago, global leaders celebrated a landmark deal on biodiversity.
We are finally starting to forge a peace pact with nature.
A United Nations treaty committing 196 governments to complete or at least embark on protecting 30% of the world's natural habitats by 2030. But the cheers over that deal have been replaced by alarm bells.
Ecosystems are unraveling. We're headed towards species extinction.
The World Wildlife Fund says the average size of monitored wildlife populations have suffered a 73% decline in the last 50 years. It's even worse in Latin America and the Caribbean, a 95% decline. Species in particular danger include Amazonian pink river dolphins.
We're deforesting like mad. The fires burning in the tropical rainforests, coral reefs bleaching. So that's why we're seeing such huge declines in Latin America and the Caribbean.
These findings have been released as Colombia prepares to host the successor to the 2022 Biodiversity Summit, which concluded with that binding treaty. Conservationists like Rebecca Shaw want to see binding financial commitments from both the private sector and governments, as well as an end to subsidies for fossil fuels, typically aimed at keeping consumer energy costs down.
That's $7 trillion a year in subsidy that is undermining climate systems and nature.
And this summit takes place just weeks before what's considered the most consequential US presidential election of the modern era.
We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to get your energy costs in half.
Not least due to its implications for climate change.
Even though 2024 is once again setting extreme temperature records, Donald Trump's campaign platform doesn't contain a single word about environmental protection, though plenty about extracting fossil fuels like oil, which drive climate change. And Trump's advisors say if he wins the White House, he will once again withdraw the US from the International Climate Change Treaty, having done so in his first term, only for current President Joe Biden to rejoin it.
And while Democrats are typically more concerned about the environment, polling suggests it's dropped way down the list of priorities for all voters. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Coming up, a high-profile retirement in the sports world, plus find out who won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And later, top designers gather for one of the biggest events of the year, Shanghai Fashion Week.
I see a country on the move.
There's my opportunity.
Is it good to change so fast?
Yes, but it's a challenge.
We have one foot in the future.
But we never forget our past.
We need to talk to one another.
And listen.
More than 1 billion voices telling their stories. Rediscovering China, only on CGTN.
It's official. One of the world's greatest tennis players of all time has announced his retirement. 38-year-old Rafael Nadal, by all counts, is considered a legend. He's won 22 Grand Slam titles throughout his career. Nadal, who's had to deal with a number of injuries, called the decision difficult. His final tournament will be the Davis Cup next month, where he'll be playing for his home country of Spain. South Korean author Han Kang is the latest Nobel laureate. She won the top prize in literature for her intense poetic prose. The Nobel Committee says her work confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life. Han is the first South Korean to win the Nobel Prize in literature and the second South Korean to ever win the prestigious award. Former President Kim Dae-jung won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2000. Prize winners receive $1.1 million from the Swedish Academy. Shanghai Fashion Week has kicked off, showcasing the latest styles for next spring and summer. And this year, a growing number of foreign designers are trying to break into the Chinese market by joining one of Asia's biggest fashion events. Chen Tong reports.
With the debut of the works of Chinese renowned fashion designer Liu Yan, the Spring and Summer 2025 Shanghai Fashion Week has officially kicked off. Liu Yan's new collections this season continues her style of simple cutting.
This season continues our style of big woman. We've combined some retro elements from the 1980s.
In addition to fashion debuts, showrooms with over 300 brands are in town to welcome buyers.
It's the second season for the Shanghai Fashion Week this year. And what's special about this year is even more foreign faces are set to be in attendance. Over 50% of the exhibitors at the show are foreign brands searching for opportunities in the Chinese market.
It's the first time for Vietnamese designer Linh Nan to attend a fashion week outside Vietnam. She believes her evening dress design caters to the taste of Chinese consumers.
I decided to go to Shanghai. This is the first gate to go to international because Shanghai is the biggest one, the biggest fashion week in the world or in Asia.
Already toured the previous season this March, US buyer Marvin reveals is back again to Shanghai this season.
It is different than kind of like Paris or New York. It just seems more innovative. Yeah, more technology is being used and more creativity. Yeah, so I think it's a fresh take on fashion. So far, I really enjoyed the 3D footwear. That's something very fresh and new for us.
Fashion activities this season will last until the 17th of October with hundreds of commercial and designer brands showing their looks for the spring and the summer season next year. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Asiye Namdar. For more news anytime, go to our website, cgtn.com.
Welcome to Dialogue. In a resolution adopted at the third plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee, the Communist Party of China presents its commitment to deepen structural, scientific and technological reform, a message which comes at a crucial time as the country is transitioning to a more technology-driven economy. How will China accelerate progress in the technology sector? How will China deal with the fierce competition and even suppression instigated by the U.S.? And what are China's goals in the new tech-driven economy? Join us for our discussion today from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Liu Ke, Chair Professor of Southern University of Science and Technology, Dean of the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and the Dean of the Clean Energy Institute, Carl Fay, Professor of Strategy at the BI Norwegian Business School in Oslo, and affiliated scholar at the Boao Forum for Asia, Warwick Powell, Senior Fellow at Taihe Institute, and Pascal Coppens, keynote speaker, author, and China expert. Welcome to Dialogue. Liu Ke, I will start with you here. We do hear stories of China making progress in science and technology with specific stories in this area or that area with this machine or this and that. Tell us, what's your understanding where China is in terms of science and technology in the global situation?
Well, as we all know, in recent years, China increased its R&D budget, no matter for universities or research institutes or industry, a lot. And also many returnees as well as local graduates, China now probably produce the most PhDs among all the countries in the world. So with all the investment, with all the economic development, with all the universities, plus Chinese Academy of Science, as well as those industrial research institutes in those big companies, no matter state-owned or the private sector. So if you look at the R&D budget, China is already in one of the largest investment there. With all the investment as time going, so there's a more and more scientific, no matter results, no matter from publication point of view, you look at the Nature Index, look at the publications, Nature Science, or look at some of those big scientific projects, right? The space project, as well as like the telescopes, also in the deep ocean, deep sea, deep earth. There are a lot of big scientific programs going on in China. So I think now China and the US, and of course Europe, EU, become the three major largest R&D, or you could call continental or countries or organizations in the world. So with all the investment there, it's a natural result.
I think it's a natural result. So, Carl, do you agree with Liu Ke that after years of or decades of investment and, of course, a focus on science and technology, China is indeed making, tremendous progress?
So I partially agree and partially don't. I do think that the transformation that Chinese higher education has gone through over the last 20 years is probably the largest and most impressive that's ever happened around the world. And in terms of things like the number of patents filed, now China leads for the world. This is really impressive. If you look at journal publication, China's really at the top as well. However, I do think China needs to bring out things. However, in creativity, innovation, which is critical to really make those absolute top impacts, I think that China lags somewhat behind. And I think that's partially due to the education system where so much focus has been on memorization. No one can memorize as well as Chinese students. However, now with AI, with the internet, there's not such a great benefit to know a lot of knowledge. It's about using knowledge in creative ways. And I'm hopeful that now the next stage of China's evolution will be to push this creativity envelope, which I'm very confident that China can do, but it needs to take that step forward.
Well, Warwick, of course, I think most of the people would agree, yes, indeed there's remarkable progress over the past decades. We mentioned about these journals published or the index, Nature, for example. For those who are not familiar with this, we have a few numbers here. For example, in 2003, America produced 20 times more of these high-impact papers than China. According to data from Clarivate, a science analytics company. By 2013, 10 years later, the U.S. produced about 4 times the number of top papers than China. And in 2022, China surpassed both the U.S. and the entire European Union. Warwick, what's your initial response to these numbers, and to what factors do you attribute it to this success to?
Yeah, look, as the other guests have already mentioned, these numbers and the rate of growth and the sheer volume really speaks to the results of probably more than 20 years of investment, actually, because we're talking about the effects of generational capacity building. So I think the first thing to notice is that the achievement of these sorts of outcomes is actually quite remarkable. In fact, I don't think that there is any other society that has achieved such a large volume of development in such a short space of time. I think also there is actually an underestimation of the extent to which there is actually creativity. And I'll draw two observations here. One is that there is data which shows that publications involving Chinese authors actually correlate quite tightly with references outside of the narrow sphere in which that particular piece of work is being done. And an aspect of creativity and innovation is the ability to step place in the development of what some people would call a technology society. So in one respect, there is a lack of breakthrough innovation that we might usually associate with leading edge innovation, but there is an incredible amount of practical innovation and practical applied creativity.
Well, let's turn to Pascal. Pascal, you wrote a book on the Chinese innovation. Share with us, what's your finding? What are your findings? What's your discovery here?
Well, I wrote the book in 2018, so it's already 6 years old. And at that time, I really was talking about the fact that I believe that by 2025, China would start to set standards in innovation in pretty much every industry that I described in the book, which is about 10 different industries. And if I look back today, I mean, we're talking about 6 years. Most of these industries, China already achieved standards which were, are mind-boggling. If you think about telecommunication or electrical vehicles, or even these days biotech, it's really impressive. I think that what I kind of agree and disagree with some of the comments before is that, in my view, creativity is something that we in the West, in Europe, in America, has always been focused on as being the sole or best way for innovation. And I do believe that has been true in the past. But today it's much more and more about artificial intelligence and systems actually helping us to do the innovation. And a lot of it is also about having the quantity of people to do the clinical tests, to do maybe apply some of that innovation to see if it stands or not. And so it's not just about the geniuses, not that the geniuses aren't important anymore, but I think it's a different balance than 50 years ago. And so China has a big advantage in that. I think we could call it more about, I call that contextual innovation rather than applied innovation, because for me, applied innovation is always about putting it in the product, and if there's no product or market, you don't use it. But contextual means that there's a reason, a ground to do it. And I think that's where China truly excels. Where in Europe, in America, in the West in general, we are more focused on individual achievements and to collaborate with certain people to ultimately come up with that next big thing. I think the two are starting to melt together, and I think China is definitely in a creative wave right now. Specifically, the last years, we feel that a lot of people are interested in that.
So, Carl, are you saying that the Chinese way of, let's say, innovation, or is a bit different from the Western practice here?
So, I still stick with my comment that I do believe that China has room to grow in creativity, although I hear what some of the guests are saying in some examples that are counter to that. I do agree that there is a greater importance today to having systems to support innovation, and I do think China's done an outstanding job of that. But I do still stick with that. I think it would be beneficial for China to focus more on creativity in their educational system. Okay. But I think one of the real strengths of the Chinese system has been experimentation. For example, I used to be Dean of University of Nottingham Business School, China, a foreign university in China. That was doing a lot of different things than the way the average place is in China. And Chinese universities and the Chinese government can look around and pick up some things from that and then apply them elsewhere. There are other examples that are very interesting. For example, one real interesting project in China right now is Hong Kong University of Science and Technology in Guangzhou, where you don't have any traditional functional units anymore. There is no business school. There is no school of engineering. There is no school of physics. Instead, they're focused around industrial themes and bringing a very cross-disciplinary approach to solving these themes, which has great potential, I think. So I think one of the key strengths that China's done really well with is allowing experimentation and even encouraging experimentation, seeing what works, and then replicating that and moving forward. That's one of the reasons that China's been able to make such progress in a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
What's behind the next door? What motivates us to find the truth? To understand the world, we must see it from different angles. Never stop searching. Go deeper. Go further. Be open-minded. Be engaged. Open the door through dialogue, where ideas do matter.
Luke, do you agree? Like, okay, here on one hand, of course, we have a large number in terms of population, in terms of graduates, in terms of engineers, researchers, because we have the largest, or used to be the largest population in the world, and of course, and we have a practice of experimenting things since the start of the reform and opening up, on pilot programs. Is that part of the strength of the system here?
I think so. And another part is if you look at many like principal investigators in the leading universities of China, they're all returnees like me, right? We all spend like 20, 30 years in US in different organizations there. So they bring back all the, I think, the strengths and also the activities of the research back to China, right? So like our return China, close like 14 years, right? We've been like working out, I started my career after my PhD in the Exxon's Corp Research, one of the biggest oil companies. Then I worked for United Technologies, UTC Fuel Cells Research. Now joined GE Global Research. We were being in the best industrial labs in the US, and also like many other returnees. If you look at the president of most of the universities of China, they probably more than half of them, they've been educated either in US, Europe, Australia, or other countries there. So they know what's kind of R&D activities going on in other countries. So they bring back this one. Plus, like it depends on the culture and also the system in China here. And we also do a lot of the learning here. I think the Chinese people are fast learners, right? We are not the best innovators in the world at this stage. But I think as time going in the innovation, yes, I think I kind of agree, right? The elementary school, high school, the examination, all the state entry-level examination, that's kind of limited people's creativity. But most people get there, at least graduate students, grad study outside. And also you have such a big population, there's at least some small percentage of people has creativity. So based on just a probability theory, right, there's going to be some people also have creativity as well. So that's, I think, those reasons all combined together bring the current status of the science technology today. Of course, I think there's still a lot need to be improved. For example, right, the number of publication is tremendous, like the number just mentioned. But if you look at the very, very top quality papers or research innovations, for example, those Nobel standard, like Nobel Lawrence standard, we still lack of. But I think still take time. Of course, that's also our education system also need to be reformed. Not only all the university level, but starting from the very beginning, right? Elementary school up till like middle school, high school. I kind of agree with the other guests saying that with all the AIs developed there, just memorize is not no longer that like it's still important, but it's not that critical, right? In old days, we call like knowledge is power. Knowledge is still the power, but in modern days, the creativity is power. creativity is much more important than knowledge. Because now with one Apple phone, you can have all the knowledge of the world stored in that Apple phone. But just knowledge is not good enough. I think we need more focus on how to enhance the creativity, also from education from very beginning. So that's a part I think China still has a lot of room to grow. Although we made a great progress, but I think there's still a lot need to learn and a lot need to be improved.
Well, of course, people is one of the elements mentioned in the Economist magazine, talking about the reshaping of the Chinese science. The other factors they mentioned is money, basically investment, and then equipment. And of course, in addition to people, mostly returnees from overseas studies there. Tell us more about investment and equipment. What do they refer to? Like equipment. I mean, in every society, every country, if there's a lab, you need equipment, right?
I'm sure that accompanying an investment in people, of course, requires an investment in the hard infrastructure, the tools and the equipment that people will use. You mentioned laboratory equipment, of course. But in this day and age, we're also looking at data centers and computational capacity and the pipes that can move data quickly to enable researchers to collaborate. So I think we're looking at an entire ecosystem that has been developed over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. I think the other point about this, and I think this goes to the general comments from everybody here tonight, is that there is a need to continue to push the envelope about how you get those cross-disciplinary connectivities to open up the spaces in which unexplored areas could emerge and where new framings of the world might reveal themselves. And a continual investment in people and a continual investment in equipment and facilities will be necessary for that. So, in many ways, this is an ecosystem that you can't just rest on your laurels in. You've got to keep investing and keep moving forward.
Well, let's take a look at the area. They say people basically agree. China is strong, and the area China is still weak. According to the article, then China is strong in materials science, chemistry, environment and ecology, physics. And then China is lagging behind in terms of space science, clinical medicine, immunology. So Pascal, why China is lacking in this particular area, for example, space science, clinical medicine, immunology, but we are ahead of other countries in terms of material science?
Yeah, there was a report from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI, some year ago that came out, where they found that out of 44 critical technologies, that China would be ahead in 37 out of 44 in the world. And these 7 that are remaining are exactly those that you just mentioned, that are actually where US is still ahead. So I would be very cautious in saying China is behind in many areas. It's maybe only like in 5% or 10% of, well, more than 10%, but 10% of the whole list that ASPI came of. So why China is behind is most likely because that has not been their focus in the last years. Now, if you talk about space, I mean, of course, they're talking about small satellites. They're not talking about going to the moon because China did that already twice. And so I think that's a different story. Of course, vaccines is in there. There's things like ChatGPT and large language models. So there's a lot of things that came out the last years. What's interesting is to weigh that against the big bulk of other technologies that China is still ahead. So I don't see China being too much behind because of certain reasons. I think it's just because historical, that was not the focuses that China had. I also believe that in the past, China did not need to innovate in many areas because they could just buy many things that now today is much more difficult. And when the market and the environment becomes more difficult, then, well, you're forced to start doing certain things which you didn't have to do 5 or 10 years ago. And so this will be such a big distance.
Okay, we'll see as time goes on. So Liu Ke, of course, we are strong in some areas, and like behind other countries, in certain areas. People say China is weak in basic science or pure science compared with, applied science. Like we are very pragmatic. As long as there is a need, we will make it to meet the need. But if it's like for pure science, for say curiosity-driven. That kind of research and study, China is pretty weak. Does that also have something to do with maybe culture, maybe our education system? As earlier we mentioned we stress very much about memory rather than, say, develop or explore the potential of the individuals,
I think there's two aspects here. Number one, yes, I think the curiosity-driven, that's still, I think we are kind of a lack of, because I live in U.S. for over 20 years. If I look at the professors in university in the U.S., right, they are most like a curiosity or interest-driven, right, because they have many other opportunities. If they just want to make money, they have many other career paths to choose. The reason they choose as a professor is because they just have passion and curiosity and interest on science. In China, it's probably because of historical culture reason. The certain people doing research is for the curiosity or industry, but certainly it's for just make a living there. So that's the one part. And another part, as far as people always say, oh, China is strong applying science and basic science. I kind of actually do not agree with this. Depends on your definition, right? Because if we look at the basic science to create a paper, China already have enough publications here. If you look at the AI papers, I read that like China, if you look at the top 10 universities, there's 9 in China. But if you look at the AI industry, are we leading? No, right? It's really the NVIDIA for the chips and also OpenAI's, Microsoft, Google, they all have much better than us. So I think we are not only lack of only pure basic science, but more like from industrial point of view. The industrial research, that's even more part China is lack of, because we don't have the world leading company who leading like Elon Musk's Tesla leading although we have bigger EV industry, but we are still technology-wise we not exceed Tesla yet. We have a lot of papers published on AI, but we don't have a strong AI industry yet. Right? We have a lot of papers published, but we still cannot produce the best airplane like Boeing. We cannot produce the best chips like NVIDIA, and there's many other examples like this, like the all software system, open system, Microsoft and Google's.
Why we are not able to lead in, let's say, AI industries, or to produce chips, for example, in particular advanced chips. I mean, of course, there's historical reasons China was weak. I mean, China remains weak in some area. But then...
Well, my observation is that the most scientists, the best scientists in China still in different universities and also the like Chinese kind of science there. So the industrial research, right? We have like company we all know like Huawei, and I'm not sure if I should mention their name in this program or not. But like they already growing, they're learning, they learning how those multinationals to do research, right? They put like about 140 something billion RMB in research budget. That's already one of the biggest research budget, right? It's actually more than Chinese computer science. But we only have one. We don't like US. We have like just AI. We have like Google. We have Microsoft. We have all those big sevens, right? They all put like many research in one company. They do the organizational research because the industry. Because I was work for the multinational there, so that part I think my observation is that's the most part China is lacking. It's not the paper. China already have enough paper. So a lot of people say China is not good at basic science. If not basic science, although we are lack of the best paper, the top paper, but if the total amount, right? If you look at investment on the big science, so I think we already did a lot.
Yes.
If I compare the basic papers versus the industry, I think we are lacking those companies like who produce big airplane like Boeing. We need the industrial research is the part we need to enhance, not only emphasize the basic science.
Industrial part. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.
What's behind the next door? What motivates us to find the truth? To understand the world, we must see it from different angles. Never stop searching. Go deeper. Go further. Be open-minded. Be engaged. Open the door through dialogue, where ideas do matter.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome to Global Business on CGTN. I'm Gerald Tan in Washington. The strikeout, deadly destruction after Hurricane Milton tears through Florida. The fallout, Hurricane Helene pushes unemployment claims to the highest level in a year. And the burnout. Mental Health Day puts a spotlight on the workplace. Milton is cutting a destructive path through Florida. The dangerous storm is moving into the Atlantic after making landfall near Siesta Key, roughly 100 kilometers south of Tampa. It spawned powerful tornadoes across the state, floods and storm surges. Water rescues are still underway, and the flooding is expected to last for weeks. The heavily populated Tampa Bay area appears to have escaped the devastating storm surge, but the barrier islands are inundated and some totally unreachable. Millions have no power or clean drinking water. At least 12 people are confirmed dead. Well, CGTN's Nitsa Soledad Perez is in Siesta Key with the very latest. Nitsa, you were in the thick of the storm. How are things?
Well, people and authorities are still assessing what happened here after Hurricane Milton. The majority of them are attributed to the tornado outbreak that preceded actually Hurricane Milton during Wednesday that day. 5 of them happened in Port St. Lucie. That's on the opposite side of where the storm made landfall. Also in Palm Beach County, people had to be rescued from the rubble because of a different tornado. All this highlighting the widespread impact that this storm has had in the state of Florida. Emergency crews are undergoing rescue operations in Hillsborough County, in Clearwater. And at this time, close to 3 million people are without power. And this is especially impactful for a population that endured a hurricane, another one, 2 weeks ago. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been touring different areas that were impacted by Hurricane Milton. Let's take a listen.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall, and the storm surge, as initially reported, has not been as significant overall as what was observed for Hurricane Helene. Right now, it looks like Sarasota County had the most significant storm surge.
Here in Sarasota County, 66% of the homes are without power. 340 people had to be rescued from flooded waters way higher than this. And again, power is a big issue because people cannot access gas stations, therefore no mobility for thousands of residents of this part of Florida. Gerald.
Nitsa, you've been out and about speaking to residents. What are they saying? What more can you tell us?
Well, I am in Siesta Key, where Milton made landfall. We came here earlier in the day when access was restricted. Actually, one of the residents, he gave us a ride through the town, and he's the one that you will be hearing from, his Mike Holderness. He's a small business owner. He was just trying to absorb what nature brought onto them for a second time. Let's listen.
It's a big mess. We still had the trash that was not picked up, so that had a lot of projectiles flying around. We had some flooding, lost some roofs. Hopefully no loss of life. We're just out here assessing the situation, helping clean out the road and seeing what we can take care of.
Were you expecting it to be worse?
I don't know. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It looks like some areas have taken it harder than others on Siesta Key. You know, but yeah, I'm probably a little relieved that it wasn't worse than it is.
Other residents were thankful that Milton was not as strong as they expected it to be. It weakened from a Category 5 to a Category 3. And here, the storm surge was not as high as forecasted. That said, hurricane season is not over. It's scheduled to end. Waters are. I would not be surprised if we get another hurricane before this season ends.
That's our Nitsa Soledad Perez in Siesta Key. Thanks very much. Well, extreme weather is creating headwinds in the latest economic data. The aftermath of Hurricane Helene pushed more Americans to file applications for unemployment benefits. That's one of 2 pieces of stats out from the U.S. today. The other, the latest read on inflation. Well, our Karina Mitchell is in New York to break it all down. Karina, let's start with the labor market. Jobless claims have jumped at the highest level in a year.
Yeah, so on both fronts, Gerald, actually a hotter print than we wanted to see, than anyone wanted to see. So on those unemployment claims, first-time unemployment claims for the prior week came in at 258,000. The estimate there was for 230,000, so hotter than expected. And it's the highest number that we've seen in just over a year. But as you mentioned, it's important to put this into perspective. Many of those job losses came due to the impact of Hurricane Helene, particularly in Georgia and North Carolina. Carolina, and then that Boeing strike in Michigan. So hopefully these job losses are not long-term, and a lot of these people hopefully will return to work fairly quickly. Now let's move on to that CPI print, because we did see a month-on-month rise of 0.2%, slightly hotter than expected. That pushed the year-over-year number to 2.4%. But again, that's better than the 2.5% we saw in August, and it's the lowest that we've seen inflation since February of 2021. So it's important to take these things into consideration. Now, core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy, that's a bit of a bigger rise, up by 0.3%, so a little bit stickier there. Year over year, 3.3%. So the Fed is obviously watching this, and they'll consider what to do. Raphael Bostic, the Atlanta Fed president, after this data came out, saying, you know, this is choppy information, and perhaps the best thing the Fed can do is hold off and not cut rates at their next meeting in November. I'm sure they'll look at a lot of other information before making their decision. But this result is something to watch, but nothing to worry too much about, Gerald.
So, Karina, bearing down a little bit on some of the data, what helped and hurt the inflation print?
Yeah, well, this was very interesting because food was one of the big contributors to the rise. We saw a jump of 0.4%. That number has been flat for the last 7 months. Part of the reason may have been that port strike on the East Coast and Gulf Coast. People thought that that might go on for an extended period of time. So the price of things like fruit and vegetable meat, that went up by 1%. And that could have contributed to the rise that we saw. Now, shelter costs also up by 0.2%. That's actually less than a 0.5% jump that we saw last month. But those two contributing factors accounted for over 75% of the gains. Apparel prices went up by 1%. That also potentially could be tied to worry over that port strike. On the flip side, we did see energy go down by 1.9% and gas down by 4.1%. As I said, the Fed will definitely watch what's going on, but CPI isn't their official barometer for inflation. They look at PCE for that. But this is the last CPI print that we'll get before the U.S. presidential election. You can bet both candidates are going to try and spin this data to their advantage with just over 3 weeks to go before the election, Gerald.
You can bet that. Karina Mitchell, live for us in New York. Thanks very much. Well, let's look now at how all that data played out on Wall Street. John Terrett is at the New York Stock Exchange. John, market's not very happy?
Indeed. No, not really. Let's talk about the hurricane first of all, shall we? Now, the thing to understand here is that Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, pretty much says it all when he said that it was not, in the end, the worst case scenario. And I thought it was very interesting that Governor DeSantis laid into Wall Street as well. Somebody asked him what the cost overall would be for Hurricane Milton. And he said, well, what does Wall Street know? Wall Street doesn't know anything. Don't ask such silly questions. Now, the insurance company stocks all went up. And the reason for that is that when Milton made landfall near Sarasota, what happened was, we thought, I think, that he was going to maintain its speed all the way across the small peninsula that is Florida. And in the end, it didn't do that. It almost immediately went down to a Category 3 and then down to a Category 1 very swiftly and off out into the Atlantic. So for that reason, the insurance company stocks are rising today. Nationwide by 1/14 of 1%, Allstate by 0.5%, Progressive by 0.4 of 1%. Worth bearing in mind the REITs, the reinsurers, because remember, we insure ourselves and our homes from the insurance companies. They insure themselves from the REITs or the reinsurers. Rates for REITs have been down lately, but now with all these hurricanes coming through, including Helene last week and now this one, Milton, I think those REITs rates are going to go up quite sharply. The other side of the story, of course, is crude oil and natural gas. Now, the truth of the matter is there are 3 million homes without power at the moment and businesses, but 70% of them are natural gas. And we're down to a situation where you have consumption versus production. Consumption is down because 3 million people can't access natural gas and crude oil. But production of natural gas and crude oil was not stopped by this hurricane. That continued for the most part in those 125 oil rigs that are in the Gulf of Mexico. And the port of Tampa and the port of Manatee were not affected. The hurricane went south of them, and so they're open. And that's important because that's where most of Florida's fuel comes in. So we've got West Texas oil, $75. Brent, 70, I've got it at $79, both of them up by more than $2 in one day. ExxonMobil up 0.8 of 1% and Chevron ahead by 0.6 of 1%. Quickly, Delta Airlines, the big airline, gave us their earnings today. Shares down 1%. I'm afraid their forecast for sales and for profit are much lower than have been expected. That's why their share is down. And we are waiting. I don't know what time this happens, but it happens this evening. And Tesla, Elon Musk, is going to unveil the robo-taxi. Now, this is very important for Elon Musk because the board at Tesla didn't want him to make it. It was delayed. And now today we see it for the very first time. And what's important about the robo-taxi is it is Tesla's very first totally automated driving machine. There is no driver, and there never will be a driver. It's completely automatic in that sense. And Tesla shares are down 1% going into this. It'll be a big story tomorrow, Friday. On to the markets. Well, of course, we were cognizant of what Karina was reporting there. CPI coming in hotter than expected, but the same pretty much as last time round. We're worried, of course, about the Middle East. We're aware that Hurricane Milton wasn't as bad as it might have been. So you put that all together and you have a set of markets that tried to finish in the green but couldn't. So the Dow was down 1/14 of 1%. The Nasdaq was completely flat but in the red. S&P 500 down by 1/5 of 1%, and Bitcoin down 2%. On to Europe. They were slightly concerned about the CPI figure there. London down, but only by 6 points. Germany down 1/4 of 1%, the same in France. And now on to the APAC region there, with China stocks making a comeback on Thursday. Hong Kong up 3%. The Nikkei in Japan up 1/4 of 1%, and the Kospi in the ROK ahead by 1/5 of 1%. So it's Friday now, and we really get cracking into earnings season. JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo will give us their earnings, getting the bank season off, hopefully to a good start, although I think there's some doubt about that here. And also PPI, cousin of CPI that we had today. All of that coming up on Friday then. Jerry?
We will look forward to that. Thanks very much, John Terrett. Well, coming up on the show, who says you need a CEO 24/7? We look at the trend of part-time boss in the C-suite.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
Fractional hiring is a job market trend catching on in the United States. It's basically hiring someone for a fraction of the time of a full-time employee. Now, the practice has taken off post-pandemic as more companies operate with leaner resources. It's even affecting the C-suite. A fractional C-suite divides executive functions into part-time roles, with CEOs, chief operating officers, and chief financial officers hired on a part-time basis. According to research done with biotech startups, for example, it could save a firm between 25% and 40% of the cost of a traditional C-suite. Another benefit, both sides get to test each other out before going full-time. Well, my colleague Poppy Mputing spoke with Lauren Seidel-Baker, an economist with ITR Economics. Lauren delved deeper into the trend, telling us why it makes sense.
So you don't hire a CEO full-time, you'll hire a CEO part-time, but they're actually an independent contractor, so not even a direct employee of this company. It's really good for startups, groups that are just too small or just don't have the resources to hire that traditional C-suite with the expertise that they need. So you might be hiring a CEO, maybe a chief marketing officer, a chief technology officer. This doesn't have to be a long-term thing. Sometimes it's just for one stage of a company's life cycle, or just one project, maybe bringing one product to market, where you need very specific expertise at a high level, but you don't need to commit to that individual full time.
So, Lauren, what types of roles or industries even are most using this approach?
It's very common in the startup world, so biotech is a big one. Anything technology-based, there is a need, again, for expertise. However, we're also seeing this trend in more broad companies. Again, usually they tend on the smaller side, but there is a need for fractional hiring for just one specific project. Maybe you're entering a new market as an already large business, and this won't be a permanent position. So both sides can go into it with that temporary nature, with flexibility, more so than bringing on an individual full-time. So we are seeing a diverse array of these of sectors coming into fractional hiring, but again, startups, technology firms are the most prevalent at the moment.
Now, you've spoken to some of the benefits. What could be the downsides here?
Sure. There is always the culture downside anytime we're talking about, especially these smaller firms, especially with the new remote post-COVID world. So you have to keep in mind you are only hiring a fraction of this individual. They very likely have other time commitments. They won't be on call 24/7. They won't have that same buy-in as maybe a founder of a company would. So culture, their perceived commitment often can be a bit of a downside. In this case, it's just about finding the right individual that really fits with this company, that you can overcome some of those hurdles.
So to that point, how can fractional hires actually contribute to long-term company culture, or is their role designed to be simply tactical?
No, I think they can absolutely contribute to the culture. In many cases, these are experts in their field, and they really have the best practices from their array of experiences, this type of individual that a company might not be able to afford as a full-time hire. So they're bringing that culture from other experience, from other firms that they've worked for, other really stages of their life, and they can contribute that. It's just about creating that cohesion even across typically remote, not always remote, but typically remote environments.
Right, and to that point, we have seen more remote working roles since the pandemic. We've also been seeing a return to work from other companies. So how do you see this trend evolving over the next few years?
It's very interesting how many companies are pulling folks back into the physical office. There are upsides and there are downsides. What we're seeing more often than not is some amount of hybrid work. So the vast majority of the data that I track, it shows the number of workers who work at least one day remotely is very high, over 50%. I think most estimates have it in the 75 to 80% range. However, the full-time remote workers, that's much smaller. It's probably in the 10 to 15% range by our best estimates. So I think the numbers are somewhat inflated as we talk about the no longer needing these offices. Even if you're going in just one day a week, just one day a month, you do still need that physical location. It remains to be seen what sectors will remain fully remote. Clearly, we can do a lot of things by remote meetings, by these calls. It's becoming much more normal, but there is still some benefit to that FaceTime.
Stay with us here in Global Business. A secret to tapping China's vast market of young shoppers. More after the break.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. wisdom across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
So October 10th marks World Mental Health Day, and since a lot of us spend a huge part of our day in the office or the factory, it's apt that this year's focus is mental health at work. Research shows that poor working conditions, discrimination, low pay and job insecurity contribute to poor mental health. Meanwhile, stigmas prevent workers from seeking help. And how about this? Each year, some 12 billion working days globally are lost to depression and anxiety. That amounts to about $1 trillion in lost productivity annually. In China, the government is stepping up efforts to ease mental health challenges for young people. Yang Junhao has more.
Xiao Yu has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The 14-year-old is receiving regular psychological counseling at the service center designated for minors with mental health issues, located in Kunming, capital city of southwest China's Yunnan province.
She didn't like to communicate with us at home before. If we try to talk with her a bit more, she will get irritated. But after the treatment, I noticed she's more receptive during our conversations.
Xiao Yu's experience is not an isolated case. Youth mental health is a global issue, and China is not exempt. An official report reveals that in China, nearly 30 million children and adolescents under the age of 17 are grappling with emotional disorders and behavioral challenges. This service center was founded in 2022 through collaborative efforts by the city's youth league, health, and educational departments. It's equipped with various therapeutic facilities.
We have consistently adhered to three principles: our commitment to public welfare, our focus on professionalism, and our emphasis on safety. In terms of public welfare, whether for evaluations or professional interventions, we do not charge any fees.
Currently, the center's expert pool consists of around 180 psychiatrists and psychological counselors from 19 institutions. In total, the professionals have provided over 29,000 hours of service to young people with various symptoms.
There are many contributing factors, but the most significant ones are related to family issues, such as parental divorce and the phenomenon of left-behind children. Furthermore, the current education system places substantial academic pressure on students.
Surveys conducted by the center indicate positive feedback, but Lin Qin says their efforts are just a small step, given the vast number of individuals in need.
We are currently establishing sub-centers at the county level. However, we have realized that our professional capacity is somewhat limited. Therefore, we hope to attract more professionals to join our team, allowing our model to be replicated and promoted in more counties.
Experts urge parents to adopt a more proactive attitude.
We hope to disseminate psychological knowledge to every family, encouraging them to overcome the stigma surrounding mental health issues and seek timely medical attention and treatment.
They believe that every child is unique with their own strengths and abilities, and each one deserves to be seen and properly cared for. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Kunming, Yunnan Province.
And for many, a bit of retail therapy is a favorite remedy to fight away those blues. And in China, if you want young people to shop, it's coming down to a deeper emotional connect. Ying Jinyu takes a closer look.
What young consumers are after now is more than just a commodity. They're looking for something to drive out negative emotions. Stress balls have been selling fast. More than 100,000 have been sold online this year. Phone cases with soothing or calming messages on them have been another popular product. Seeing the trend, many businesses are investing in this new consumption hot pot.
3、2、1，为你转身为你倾倒，我们拿铁已经做好。好的，现在。
At this cafe-inspired stuffed toy pop-up shop in downtown Shanghai, customers can place their orders and watch as it's prepared by baristas. Once ready, customers will receive these soothing toys packed in specially designed packaging such as a cake box. And posts showcasing such scenes and unboxing videos have exploded on social media, attracting many young people want to cheer themselves up.
I can reap emotional value from this performance.
Those toys give me an emotional satisfaction. To me, buying them brings me enjoyment.
This pop-up coffee shop is also getting on the trend. Besides serving drinks, it's working with the Sanxingdui Museum to offer related cultural and creative merchandise, saying young consumers are eyeing novelty and funny things that make them feel good.
This artifact is getting great popularity online as he seems like reporting to his boss.
Those fridge magnets based on culture relics also go viral online.
The market looks promising as more young people attribute their consumption motives to the emotional value. And how to provide customers with that is likely to be a focus of businesses trying to appeal to younger customers in the future. Ying Junyi, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And that's our show, but do join us later for yet another edition of Global Business. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. in Beijing. Thanks so much for your company. I'm Gerald Tan in Washington, D.C. Do stay with us on CGTN. Much more with my colleagues in Beijing coming up next. I'll see you in a little bit. Bye for now.
and welcome to the Hub on CGTN. I'm Ggwanga in Jakarta, Indonesia. China and ASEAN have a robust and multifaceted relationship. On the political front, the two sides now have a comprehensive $900 billion. Now, the two sides said they wanted to venture into forging closer people-to-people and cultural connections. How will they go about doing that? Now, during our stay in Indonesia, we talked to strategists, former politicians, to find out how. Humphrey, tell us a bit about what you do and how do you look at the current state of China-ASEAN relations?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm currently head of ASEAN-China Research Center at the University of Indonesia. And our goal is that to strengthen ASEAN-China relation. We want to contribute positively in area of economic. We also plan to do a publication. We are going to publish a book. We are working on it. We also invite some scholars from Chinese and some Asian countries.
Well, why do you think having and maintaining and even increasing China-ASEAN relations are so important?
What happened in Middle East, in Ukraine, and we cannot hide that between China and ASEAN we have unresolved issue, right? But we have to thank our leaders because they have a common consensus to find a peaceful solution in this regard. So as long as we can work together, we have to build trust. Because this year ASEAN-China has agreed to the year of people-to-people exchange. Hopefully, with this step, we can build a mutual trust, mutual understanding between people in China and ASEAN. But I also encourage that we also should think about youth generation participation in this regard. Because within 30 years, there will be 100% of us. We are going to getting older, right? So they play a pivotal role from my perspective to make sure that this relation will go in the right way, because we have common goals, right, to prosper together. Even President Xi Jinping mentioned when he had a visit to Indonesia, I think in 2013, he proposed a so-called China-ASEAN community with a shared future for mankind. I think this is a good sign from Chinese leader, because he want to ensure his ASEAN family that, okay, let's sit together, talk together. We go how even though we may face any difference in response to any issue, but at least we know that we are partner. We are not fight each other. We are partner. We should work together.
And then talking about equal partners and mutual benefits, we're reminded of the Bandung conference taking place 69 years ago in a city that is, a few hundred kilometers from here.
Yes.
And that Bandung spirit laid the foundation of China-Indonesia and China's relations with what's known as Global South today, that is marked by non-alliance, non-interference, mutual respect, treating each other as real equals and as brothers.
Yes. I think ASEAN and China, we have the same value, right? But I do hope that between ASEAN, especially from ASEAN side, we should not allow any internal parties to engage if we have any unresolved issue with China. Because we have to learn from what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Middle East. You know,
proxy wars, proxy conflicts.
Yes, we have to be careful.
But if you look at the tensions in South China Sea, external powers played a very big role.
I think that it's not a good sign for us in ASEAN, because we should not provoke any instability in our region. No matter how difficulties we may face in our dialogue with China, but we have, I believe one thing that I watched Bongbong Marcos, his remark during Shangri-La dialogue. Good thing is that he also mentioned that we want peace. I mean, if all countries want peace, probably we will work together to find, maybe, because in 30 years of our dialogue relation, we can keep this region stable, and also we can maintain peace and stability in the region. And I do believe in 100 years, this condition will still exist because trust has been built. And I think the report from Isaias Yusuf Institute in April, I think, when ASEAN forced to align with China or US, 50.5% ASEAN has chosen China. It increased if compared with last year.
This is the ASEAN survey,
yes,
not the Chinese survey.
Yes, yes, yes.
Why do you think China has been increasingly perceived as a positive country here in ASEAN?
No, I think because I think President Xi, I think China eager to show its counterpart, its ASEAN country, that yes, let's talk. He did what he said. Something that it's difficult to realize that a Western country can do it, I think.
Yeah, because you have elections every 4 years. You have you withdrew from the TPP from around months when November U.S. elections took place. Maybe Trump will be elected again.
Yeah.
And a lot of promises will be failed again.
Yeah. For me, I never forgot one day. I did my PhD in Chile, right? Professor Liu Debin. From him that I learned many things. He said to me, Humphrey, you know, from us China, when we prosper, we will have our neighbor. So please remember that. When you work on your dissertation, remember this, okay? Yes, Prof. Liu is a very good guy. And regarding us and China, also, I want to, in economic side, during economic crisis, we remember that China decided not to devaluate yuan, right?
Yes. That's 1998, 97.
At that time, no Western country helped us. If China devalued yuan, it's maybe get the situation. It's even getting worse for ASEAN member states. I think this ASEAN value. Sometimes we remember those who come and give us when we are very thirsty, right? When you give us when we are already full, it means nothing. When we are hungry, and you come, you give us the food, we will remember it. This is my philosophy. I think all ASEAN, we have this value.
Our trading relationship is also a highlight, over $900 billion.
Yes.
Why do you think that's the case? What drives bilateral trade to grow so fast?
Because we have mutual trust. I think since 2009, China became the largest trading partner of ASEAN, right? And I think in 2010, trade between China and ASEAN, it's only 200 million something. And now it's reached 900, as you say. It shows that there is a will from both sides to cooperate, to work together, as all leaders in ASEAN and President Xi always mentioned, to let no one behind. I hope that all leaders can keep this promise, because the future of our region, it depends on us, not on US or on Europe, right? So we have to solve our problem within ASEAN way. We have respect, as you said before, respect sovereignty, mutual respect, mutual understanding, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Chairman Dino Jalal, let's get right to it. You brilliantly coined a few words. You said China-ASEAN relations are currently underappreciated, it's underrepresented, so on and so forth. Can you elaborate what you mean?
The reason why the relationship between ASEAN and China is unique and special is because both sides had been underrated, underestimated, and underappreciated. Many who thought that ASEAN would be doomed to failure as a regional organization many times over, in 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on. But we proved them wrong, because ASEAN had grown from 5 to 6 to 10, and soon to be 11, and had become a very coherent organization that is in control of our region. And China too. China stayed the course. China kept growing steadily based on its own model. So, I think President Xi Jinping's comment that every country must be able to choose their own development model is something that resonates well with countries in the global south, including in many in Southeast Asia.
You think China has walked the walk when they repeatedly trying to send this message to the world out there that it's not interfering, it's respecting diversity and people's own models of development that suits their own national conditions?
I think that's a very important point, Guan, because look, the reason why this works, the relationship, is that when Southeast Asian countries deal with China, we don't think like this. We don't. Oh, we got to change China. And when China deals with us, you don't think, oh, we got to change them, right? We got to change that country. No, right? It's a relationship based on goodwill, right? And non-interference and mutual respect, right? These words among us are not just words. They're actually code words, right? Like, for example, why is mutual respect always being said by China and by ASEAN, right? Because there are so many episodes where China deals with, other parts of the world where China is not listened to. So based on that, you value the term mutual respect more, and it has a special meaning to you. Same thing with us. We've been bullied, we've been, interfered, and so on. So the terms mutual respect, non-interference has a special meaning to us, and this is why the relationship works, because we understand one another.
You talk about the fact that some states treated ASEAN as a regional bloc that couldn't make big decisions, like you said, and they think the bloc is soft.
The reality is, look, ASEAN doesn't need to be EU, it doesn't need to be any other organization, it just needs to be ASEAN. This is what I call ASEAN way. We know what works for us, right? And we know how to fix things among us, right? For example, Indonesia and Malaysia, we used to have a confrontasi. We used to want to destroy Malaysia. This is in the 60s, right? Indonesia and Timor-Leste,
East Timor,
we used to have very bad relations after breakup. Indonesia, Singapore also had very bad relations and so on. So you look across Southeast Asia, many countries in the region had adversarial or conflictual relations with one another. But we fixed that, right? We fixed that in our own way, right? Even Vietnam did not want to join ASEAN because Vietnam was suspicious that ASEAN was a tool of Western countries, according to them at the time. But we showed Vietnam, no, we're not, come join us and you'll see, right? And Vietnam joined ASEAN. So ASEAN does not perform like any other regional organizations, and it should not be that way anyways. And this is the reason why ASEAN has grown, in my view, quite solid. Still with challenges, obviously, but ASEAN, I think, is quite successful as a regional organization.
Yeah. Chairman Jalal, I wanted to ask you about the cohesiveness of ASEAN, because if you think about it, it spans a great landmass, not just landmass, but incongruously stretching to the Pacific Ocean. You have Buddhism, Christianity and Muslim population a big time, and also there are different ethnicities here, islanders to, I think, Chinese, Malay, Indians. How come it has remained relatively calm and non-violent and peaceful if you compare what it is in this region versus the Middle East and Eurasia?
Southeast Asia was quite divided in the 60s and 70s. There was the Vietnam War, there was Cambodian War. There was a lot of violence, a lot of conflicts between and within nations in Southeast Asia. But I think we've benefited from good leadership, statesmanship from countries in the region. Yeah? They began to craft regionalism, right? And they produced the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which means any country that wants to play in our region, they have to sign on to it. And they were very pragmatic. They know if there's a dispute or conflict they can't deal with, then they take their time, right? But those that they can fix, then they fix. The Malaysia Philippine understanding on Sabah, which is claimed by both, for example. So there is the spirit of pragmatism and dialogue. You ask any ASEAN governments, their first preference is always, we have a problem? Okay, let's talk, right? Let's talk. One example, for example, this is a good example. In the South China Sea is the only one of major conflicts where both sides are actually talking and sitting on a table. In Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine are not talking, right? In the Middle East, Israel and Palestine are not talking, right? In the Korean Peninsula, the North and the South are not talking, right? But in the South China Sea, both sides of the disputes have been talking to formulate the code of conduct in the South China Sea, and that's it's a good sign. I hope they can wrap up their work soon, right?
On the code of conduct, which has been in the making for many years. And,
yes.
Mr. President, you also talk about 4Ds, and that was a great way to put it.
Yes.
Can you elaborate to our viewers?
Yes, I referred that ASEAN and China, as they chart their future relations, must have 4D. One is depth, right? The relationship cannot be at the elite level. It has to go down to the grassroots. It has to be dense, meaning it has to be rich in content, right? And then it has to be durable. That means it has to be resilient. It cannot. There's going to be a lot of shocks in the relationship, be among us or externally, right? And both sides have to have the quality of relationship and trust that can withstand all these shocks and jolts to the relationship, which will happen at some point. And it has to be dearly, which means it must have soul. It cannot be transactional. It must capture the heart of the political establishment as well as the public, right? And I think if we have those four, we will be in good shape in the future.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
I see a country on the move.
There is my opportunity.
Is it good to change so fast?
Yes, but it's a challenge.
We have one foot in the future.
But we never forget our past.
We need to talk to one another.
And listen.
More than 1 billion voices telling their stories. Rediscovering China. Only on CGTN.
And also we caught up with some youth representatives from ASEAN, and they have one thing in common: their love for China and the Chinese culture. Lin, welcome to the Hub on CGTN. It's great to see you. Tell us about yourself and your affiliation and your current work.
Yeah, so hello, thank you very much for having me today. So my name is Linh Chen, I'm from Vietnam. Currently I am pursuing my PhD in international development at University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. You know, before beginning my PhD in China, I was a lecturer at the university in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Besides my academic pursuit, I have been actively engaging in promoting international cooperation in bamboo sectors.
bamboo sectors.
Yes, in bamboo sectors. If you want to know more about Vietnam, you can learn about the bamboo culture. And bamboo in Vietnamese culture, it represents the resilience, but it also represents the unity and also represents the adaptability.
Do you enjoy your studies currently in China?
I really love my life in China now. China has like 5,000 years of civilization. When I visited the the historical monuments and the temples, the pagodas in Vietnam, so I can see a lot of stills and couplets, written in Chinese character, but I couldn't understand it. So this realization led me to believe that, so learning Chinese culture, can help me to better understand Vietnamese culture. And there are so many things I want to learn in China. I want to learn about Chinese medicine. I want to learn about Confucianism. I want to learn about Taoism.
The more you discover the culture, the more you think maybe you see the kinship, the similarities of the two peoples and the two cultures.
Yeah, exactly.
Any thoughts and hopes for China, Vietnamese, and maybe China-ASEAN relations, people to people, and youth exchange going forward?
Our relationship actually, getting more and more closer and more stronger and more substantive, Yes, so you can see the cooperation, implemented on all the aspects from the economy, trade, business, to the security, but also the culture, the education, the tourism, the technologies, so everything, and also, so I deeply appreciate the vision and dedications of our leaders to establish the ASEAN-China Young Leaders Scholarship programs. So this initiative not only enhance the educational cooperations, but also foster, the meaningful people-to-people exchange, the connection between China and Vietnam. And I think, the effective communications is very important for dialogue, for mutual understanding, and also for building trust. And so I think, so this initiative, help us, so young China and ASEAN leaders to build a friendship and the trust, and it will lay a very solid foundations for our political and strategic partnerships in the future. I'm very optimistic about the relationship between China and ASEAN.
I look forward to seeing you in maybe one of these days back in Beijing.
Yeah.
Let's catch up more. Thank you, Lin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bryce, welcome to the Hub on CGTN. Great to see you. Tell our viewers about what you do and why you're studying in China right now.
My name is Bryce. I'm basically from Brunei. I'm currently working in Chile, Santiago, online, hybrid. So I work in the Universidad del Desarrollo in Faculty of Government, but I'm based in Shanghai as a student in Fudan University, School of International Relations, Public Affairs as a PhD candidate.
Do you have a lot of friends studying in China, choosing China as a destination of study?
I think it's a trend, not that popular in Brunei, but it's growing in Brunei as well because I think we had almost 90 students this year. For a population of 400,000 is pretty impressive. And in Fudan University, we had 600 Malaysians, and Thais is over a few hundred. And I think in Southeast Asia, as a total in Fudan University alone, we have more than 1,000. And this was a huge increase because last year it was around 500 to 600. And last year we only had 2 or 3 Vietnamese, but this year we had almost 30. So there is a noticeable increase and noticeable trend, as well as there's a lot of language programs. So a lot of Southeast Asia member states will send students to China to learn Chinese for a year or 2.
This is the thing, because if you talk about trade, we can lower trade and non-tariff and non-tariff barriers through our customs, through our policy coordination, to have trades and goods flowing between our borders. But for languages and cultural communication, we don't have a common language. And then Southeast Asia itself is a large landmass, as diverse as it is big, culturally and linguistically. And Chinese, of course, being this very hard language, not Roman, not Cyrillic, but with characters.
Yeah, definitely. So it is a good thing because I also know that a lot of Chinese students would come to Southeast Asia to learn language as well. So having this base, like for example, some of the Chinese missions here, they could speak fluent Indonesian or Malay.
We need a means of communication, tools of communication, which we currently lack, right?
I do believe like social media is a very important aspect, and I do believe that having Chinese social media available in Southeast Asia will be very beneficial. We like especially Xiaohongshu, Little Red Book, Weibo, and Douyin. So the youths especially are able to communicate really well through sharing reels, sharing memes, and whatnot. And I do believe that this is a very good way to connect to one another.
Any final thoughts? Any final wishes for China-ASEAN youth exchange and friendship going forward?
I think everything is going really well, but I do hope that there are more dialogues and more events to be held in the future, because I do believe that the more we talk, the more we understand each other. And yeah, dialogues and discourse open bridges instead of burning them, and I really hope for more.
But would you think that the exchanges between ASEAN and your Western counterparts, Americans, Europeans now, is more robust in scale and scope than the exchanges between the Chinese and ASEANs?
Oh, I definitely think that the China-ASEAN dialogue is a lot more robust compared to the US ASEAN dialogue or the UK ASEAN dialogue, because for EU ASEAN, they're not really interested in politics, they're just interested in business. So I've been to a few of the EU ASEAN dialogue, and they just usually talk about business and development, and they're not interested in politics in general. But the US and ASEAN dialogue, they're mostly interested in politics, but not business. But China is interested in both, which is why there's more forums, there's more discussion, and they're able to understand one another over time. And yeah, especially the biggest point is that China is connected to Southeast Asia through the mainland Southeast Asia. So since we're connected by land, it's easier to communicate as well, and it's more essential.
And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan at China-ASEAN Future Relations Forum here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you so much for tuning in. On behalf of our whole team, thank you and take care.
But it could have been much worse. Homes damaged and destroyed, major flooding, and millions without power. Florida residents cleaning up and assessing the damage after yet another dangerous hurricane. At least 29 Palestinians killed after an Israeli attack on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza, plus a damning new report on what the UN calls Israel's deliberate assault on health facilities.
the colours, the music, the storytelling and everything like that really brought forth the Chinese culture and the beautiful, amazing scenes that you could create.
And bringing high culture to mass audience, traditional Chinese and international opera on a world stage in Jiangxi province. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Asiye Namdar in Washington, and we begin with the destructive aftermath of Hurricane Milton in Florida. The dangerous and powerful storm is moving into the Atlantic after making landfall near Siesta Key, about 112 kilometers south of Tampa. It spawned tornadoes and brought floods and storm surges. Water rescues are still underway, and some of the flooding is there to stay for weeks. The heavily populated Tampa Bay area appeared to have escaped the devastating storm surge, but the barrier islands are inundated and some totally unreachable. Millions have no power or clean drinking water. At least 12 people are now confirmed dead. CGTN's Nitso Soledad Perez is in hard-hit Siesta Key.
Emergency crews are undergoing rescue operations in Hillsborough County in Clearwater. And at this time, close to 3 million people are without power. And this is especially impactful for a population that endured a hurricane, another one, 2 weeks ago. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been touring different areas that were impacted by Hurricane Milton. Let's take a listen.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall, and the storm surge, as initially reported, has not been as significant overall as what was observed for Hurricane Helene.
Here in Sarasota County, 66% of the homes are without power. 340 people had to be rescued from flooded waters way higher than this. And again, power is a big issue because people cannot access gas stations, therefore no mobility for thousands of residents of this part of Florida.
It's a big mess. We still had the trash that was not picked up, so that had a lot of projectiles flying around. We had some flooding, lost some roofs. Hopefully no loss of life. We're just out here assessing the situation, helping clean out the road and seeing what we can take care of.
Were you expecting it to be worse?
I don't know. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It looks like some areas have taken it harder than others on Siesta Key. But yeah, I'm probably a little relieved.
I would not be surprised if we get another hurricane before this season ends.
Nitso Soledad Perez in Siesta Key. Now, Matt Gerber lives in Tampa and chose to ride out the storm. He talked to us about his terrifying experience.
Asiye, well, thanks for putting a spotlight on our community. I can tell you things are far better now than they were just 12 hours ago. Well, we saw the storm roll in last night, and even though the storm had downgraded, what ended up hitting the Tampa Bay area was still quite terrifying. The sound of the storm outside, the torrential rains, it was literally deafening on the wind, on the walls, on the windows. There's majority of the bay is still without power today. And earlier today, I saw the devastation that layered on devastation out in St. Pete and the Barrier Islands. It was truly unbelievable.
Well, you knew things were going to get really bad, and yet you chose to stay. Why?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I'm privileged enough to live in a building that is a new construction designed to withstand a high Category 4 hurricane up to 140, 150 miles per hour. So when I learned that about half my neighbors were staying behind, many of whom are elderly, I knew that this is where I wanted to be so I could be able to help out during and after the storm.
So how badly is your neighborhood? I know you said you ventured out. How bad is the damage? Can you give us a sense of what it looks like in your area?
Yeah, so in my area, what we saw immediately prior to the storm were colossal piles of people's belongings stripped from their homes, all because of Hurricane Helene. And these piles, many of which were as tall as people's homes, were then susceptible to the heavy rain and especially the high wind. So last night, what we found was, even though in our building, all the residences have fortified windows, our common areas are not. And we saw pieces of debris being lifted off of these piles from in front of these homes, slamming into the glass of common areas, shattering them in some places, but really turning into projectiles across and outside of the neighborhood.
Yeah, which was a big concern with these two storms being so close together. Matt, do you have power?
No, I do not, Asiye.
Oh, wow. And in terms of hurricanes, you've been through something like this before?
I have. So I've done disaster relief volunteering for about 22 years. I've been in a couple of hurricanes previous. This was by far the worst.
Wow. All right. Well, and then in the days ahead, what do you think the hardest or the biggest challenge will be in your community?
I would say one of the biggest challenges we're going to face is honestly a continuation of cleanup after Hurricane Helene. We've now been set back several days. Everything was closed in the days leading up to Milton. We are now without power. We're basically back at ground zero that we were when Hurricane Helene had passed, without food, without gasoline, without grocery stores, I should say. And so we're needing to get back up on our feet again for the second time in 2 weeks, and it's just going to take all of us helping each other, really.
And our thanks to Matt Gerber for sharing his story. Now to the Middle East, and a deadly Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza. At least 29 people are dead. Israel says it was targeting militants, but the attack reportedly hit a meeting of aid workers. Akram Al-Satari is in Gaza.
The situation is extremely catastrophic. The bombardment that hit the place was very powerful, that it took the life of the 28 people and injured the 92. The UNRWA is also upset about the situation. They have been condemning the targeting of the shelters, and they have been seeing in that as a targeting of the general life of the population who are not engaging in any military activities in the area. According to the statistics and the details of the people who were killed, some people are 87, some people are 66, some people are 85, some people are 58, some people are 52, some people are children. So the number of the people and the ages of the people are indicative of the fact that the ones who were inside that shelter, the internally displaced people, are the ones who bore the brunt of that attack and the ones who paid the heaviest price, given the large number of people who were killed, including some elderly men, women and children, and also the large number of people who were killed. The Palestinian Minister of Health made a special statement about that. They have used as a reference the details and the biodata of the people who were killed to show that the ones who were the victims of that incident are the Palestinian civilians who were targeted and who are still being targeted throughout the whole war, and who make around 2/3 of the number of victims in that war. So another incident, another targeting of a shelter, another condemnation by the international organizations, and another death and funerals that will be now heading to the graveyards if they have space, or they would be burying people on top of other people who were deceased or dead a few months or a few days or a few weeks ago. Critical situation, misery that is still continuous in Gaza.
Akram Al-Satari reporting. A UN inquiry accuses Israel of intentionally destroying Gaza's healthcare system. It calls Israel's attacks deliberate, saying they amount to war crimes. Israel has long maintained Hamas militants operate and hide in these hospitals, schools, and private homes. Hamas has denied those claims. The inquiry also accused Israel of deliberately killing and torturing medical personnel in Gaza. Israel, by the way, did not cooperate with this inquiry and says the investigation was biased. Meanwhile, UN officials accuse Israel of firing at 3 of their peacekeeping positions in southern Lebanon. 2 were injured. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, says it is deeply concerned by recent attacks on its positions and the deadliest strikes on Beirut in over a year. 22 people are dead, 100 others are injured. Yasser Hakim reports from Beirut.
Well, the United Nations said that this attack has been deliberate because there was another attack just at the same time on the parameters of the monitoring headquarters at the area, and that's destroying all the monitoring equipment and the cameras that are showing what is happening on the ground. And therefore, the UNIFIL is saying that Israel is deliberately not just fighting or hitting at the UNIFIL position, so trying to keep it hidden by hitting all the cameras and surveillance cameras and equipment in the area. The UNIFIL is there to try to sort of keep peace between the borders of the two sides, which is the de facto blue line border, that separates both. Around 10,000 peacekeeping troops are there from 50 countries, and it has repeatedly said that Israel has been targeting the UNIFIL to try to push them away from this area so that the infiltration by the Israeli military into Lebanon would continue on a more aggressive style. But the UNIFIL has previously said that it will refuse to move from the area and will keep there to try to maintain at least some kind of peaceful coexistence in this area and try to stop the fighting. So until